Good afternoon. I'm Grandpre, Director of Research for Leaders of Beautiful Struggle. We support with amendments because we agree other states have overtaxed cannabis. It is possible that there is a trade-off between addressing the black market, keeping cannabis inexpensive, and these tax rates. We think that the tax rate's so low right now in the bill that we might have reached a point of diminishing returns on what low tax rates can do, and we might be leaving hundreds of millions of revenue on the table. So a brief overview. Tax rates around the nation on cannabis vary between 15% on the low end to 35 to 40% on the high end. At 6% to 10%, Maryland would be extremely low. The high tax rates can make cannabis more expensive, but there's no demonstrable evidence that low tax rates themselves can cut the cost. Other factors, numbers of dispensary, weather, existing black market, impact cannabis costs. CEO of Weed Maps, Chris Beal, says it's density of retail establishments, not the tax rates. It's the critical factor to undermine the black market. He promotes the New Mexico model. They're going for 1,000 dispensaries. We're at 200, 400, including the micro, right? Cannabis Public Policy Consulting produced a document where they say the optimal tax rate to undermine the black market is 15 to 20%, saying, quote, although several options among these could be favorable, we recommend between a 15 to 20% tax to maximize rapid shifts to the adult use market. They also say that starting at 10% would be the optimal starting point for this strategy. So that's what we're recommending. Start at 10%, go up 1% per year to 15%. This will keep cannabis cheap. The average purchase is between $25 and $50 at a dispensary. At 10%, that's a $55 bill. 15%, only $57.5. So it's still cheap. 15% would keep Maryland on the low end of the lowest end of cannabis taxation nationwide, and the difference between black market sales between 10 and 15%, according to this document, is only 2%. Finally, the numbers. Over the first 5 years, we would risk missing out on up to $300 million in tax revenue. Without this amendment, from years 5 to 10, once the industry is mature, we'd risk missing out on $100 million per year in tax revenue. So years 5 to 10, that would be $150 million less in that community reinvestment fund we worked so hard to pass last session. So this is not to say we want to tax this. We agree it's not going to save the budget, but we can do a bit more on the high end once the industry is mature. We're not trying to strangle the industry in the grave. We agree low taxation is the best approach, but we can do more than 10% once the industry is mature, and we're open to feedback on this approach. So thank you.
Delegate Ampry.
Thank you for your testimony. I know it's hard to explain tax law in 2 minutes, so I'm trying to understand your rationale or understand. Can you briefly and succinctly as possible re-explain the argument that the low tax rate is not a determining factor in the competitive cannabis pricing, and how I guess I better understand how a 15 to 20% tax rate is still considered low. Just want to better understand the argument. So
we're not proposing 20%. No one's saying 20%. We're saying 15%, which will still be on the low end. The critical factor to undermine the black market is, of course, keeping cannabis cheap. All I'm saying is that when cannabis is really expensive, the high tax rate on top of expensive cannabis makes it even worse. All I'm saying is that having a low tax rate in itself does not produce cheap cannabis. Similarly, what many states have done is produce a tax on the manufacturer, which gets passed on to the consumer, and that increases the overall cost. That's also not what we're saying. We're saying keep it on the consumer side, but instead of starting at 6, start at 10. And again, on a $100 cannabis purchase, that'd be a difference between $110 and $115. So I don't think, not only do I not think that's substantial enough to deter people to the black market, the Cannabis Public Policy Consulting entity that did the report said that would only push 2% more into the black market. That's not going to crush the cartels. That's not going to give us what we need. But over the 5 years, once the industry is mature, we've been missing out on some of that tax revenue by keeping it at 10%. So I agree, start low, and maybe start even lower than 10%. But once the industry is mature, what I'm saying is that we can get more of that tax revenue by going above 10.
All right, that helps. Thank you.
And just to be clear, we have the Chair of Ways and Means here. We're not precluded from raising taxes in 5 years. I mean, it's what we're good at, apparently. I mean, no, we're.
Yeah.
I think,
Never thought I'd have to tell Maryland not to raise taxes.
I don't think that's our issue here. I don't think more people are concerned about us not wanting to raise taxes. So, again, we're just, as you discussed, the lower the cost. If it's 2%, that's still 2% more. Anything we can do to save lives, that's the goal. But I do appreciate your input, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. Dayvon Love, Director of Public Policy, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. My testimony will focus on the Community Repair and Reinvestment Fund, which was created by the Maryland General Assembly in 2022, with the underlying principle that black communities from which the criminal justice system was weaponized against should receive compensation if we were to say that we're going to move towards justice without the contingency of having to participate in the industry. So we're grateful for the establishment of the Community Repair and Reinvestment Fund, particularly understanding the fact that it's primarily poor and working class black folks that were the biggest targets and whose humanity was most undermined by the policy of the war on drugs. I want to call your attention, though, to page 15 of the bill that talks about the formula as to how the resources will be distributed. So the way that it was contemplated in the original language, that each jurisdiction will get a percentage of the fund. There was a formula that would determine that not every single jurisdiction would get the same amount, but jurisdictions from which were the biggest targets of the war on drugs would get a larger percentage of that. The formula, as was contemplated last year, focused on, it said that jurisdictions, the percentage that determines how much of the fund they get will be determined based on that jurisdiction's contribution to statewide cannabis-related arrests over a 20-year period from 2002 to 2022. In this version, that was changed to individuals arrested. If you look at, for instance, the zero tolerance policy of Martin O'Malley's administration between 1999 and 2006, there were 757,000 illegal arrests. Now, there aren't 757,000 people who lived in Baltimore City, but folks that were arrested multiple times. And so we offer an amendment to refer back to the original language, which uses the formula based on the amount of charges that jurisdiction contributed to statewide cannabis-related arrests and not individuals, in order to make sure that those jurisdictions that most deserve these resources are the ones that get the majority of them. Thank you.